Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining this session, and I hope all of you are doing well and keeping safe. Rahul and I are going to walk you through the personalization case, but essentially, we are trying to achieve several different objectives, right, in this 1 hour. One of which is to introduce you to this newly incubated Fractal Dimension team, which is a cross-functional team of behavioral scientists, designers, engineers, AI, uh, seen as kind of a pre-investment and collaboration with clients on the more complex and unstructured problems that are emerging in their environments, right? Uh, Part of the job is to kind of reimagine some of the products, some of the services that we offer. And one of those services is personalization. So we'll use personalization as a case in point to show how we are kind of evolving our thinking in collaboration with all the work we are doing with our clients, right? Um, as they say, a good recommendation is only as good as the decision that somebody makes against it, right? So that is going to be the primary theme of Personalization 2.0. Before I kind of move into that, a big shout out to Ranjit, Natali, and Nick for helping us with their perspectives, their point of view on what we have prepared, and the client voice is obviously at the core of what we do in Fractal. Uh, Also, I think as we kind of go through this presentation, we'll be able to showcase not just how we think about complex problems, but also how we do our work, how do we engage with our clients, what kind of tools and methods we have developed, which we can all leverage together. So, Kautuk, can you move to the second slide, please? So before we talk about the Dimension team in general, let's talk about a case in point, which we have taken to establish what personalization 2 can mean, right? And here I'll go back to some of the concepts that Professor Gerd was referring to, right? And I'm personally a big believer in how heuristics are such efficient mechanisms for us to make decisions, right? But there are certain situations like road safety, driver safety, where some of these heuristics actually work against us, and talk about it in a minute. But safety is one place where we have done a lot of work across the country, designing roads using heuristics, using environmental design, and the impact has been wonderful. Most of these safety initiatives are impersonal because they operate in the same way, irrespective of who the driver is, what is his behaviors, what is his thinking, what is his mental models around driving and safety, right? And when I kind of talk about risk as a feeling, right, it is exactly what Professor was talking about, right, which is about converting a complex problem into something as simple as a feeling, right? So rather than kind of figuring out how much and what the risk in an environment is, we kind of operate from our feelings, right? But much as I might like these feelings to be accurate and helping me in my decision making, there are a number of situations, right, where these feelings, which originate from heuristics, kind of go against us, right? One classic case, for instance, is familiarity bias, right? So as we become more familiar, we tend to take more risk, right? Which is perfectly fine. I mean, that's how we should be. I mean, in more familiar environment, we should take more risk. But when we import that heuristic in a context of driving, what leads to it is that we create more accidents near home where environments are familiar, as against away from home where environments are not familiar, right? So as much as heuristics works for us, they also, when imported from an alien environment into the current environment, they can work against you. Now, using a lot of these heuristics, a lot of this understanding of how our emotions and our mental models, inform our driving behavior, we have over the past several years influenced safety behaviors and driven some impact. But in this particular case today, I wanted to show to you how we might want to personalize driver safety, right? That driver safety rather than operating as an impersonalized, embedded in an environment intervention, which works irrespective of who I am or who Rahul is. How can we personalize it, right? So we've created a small little audio visual to showcase how in a situation of a connected car, this personalization of safety might work. So watch this video and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about how we think about decision making and personalization.
Personalization is so much more than your name on a product. It has the power to influence decisions in real time. Let's explore this in a scenario of safety with the connected car. It is 4 p.m. on a Friday. Emily, to her surprise, is done for the day much earlier than usual. As Emily's car takes into account an unlikely set of circumstances coming together, it predicts trouble. It may sound counterintuitive, but people are more accident-prone when they're in a positive state of mind. After all, they tend to be relaxed, expecting good outcomes. However, knowing Emily's record of safe driving, the car chooses not to escalate right away and begins with a subtle nudge. Instead of her usual high-tempo playlist for Friday evenings, it suggests a more cognitively engaging set of options. Hi Emily, here are some options for your ride home. Enjoy. With this, while she enjoys her ride home, she can be more alert. Now on the freeway, with a relatively empty road at 4 p.m., Emily slides into a carefree style of driving. This prompts the car to reassess the risk and take action. Accounting for Emily's long driving history and familiarity with this car, it recognizes that in this moment, a positively framed non-conscious nudge will be more effective than a negative one. Hi Emily, did a quick systems check for you. No maintenance action needed this month. Good job. Phew, that's better. As Emily enters the busy bylanes that lead home, she's thrilled to be reaching this early. The car appraises the high level of familiarity with this route combined with her eagerness to get home and the deviance from her baseline behavior today. Being uncomfortable with these odds, it opts for an active intervention. Reaching home 2 hours earlier than usual. Recommended reroute. You could pick up a coffee, get groceries, or refuel your car. And so, with a small curated detour, Emily gets home safe. Her car can now rest and learn from today's adventure so that it's better prepared for safety scenarios in the future.
Thanks, Katak. Yeah. So, so what you saw is a connected car, right? Which is in some ways, looking at a whole lot of data, a whole lot of behaviors, a whole lot of mental models, a whole lot of understanding of how heuristics and emotions work for us, right? To create some kind of a recommendation and then planting that recommendation in a decision environment so that people kind of respond to it, right? Now, we are in the business of powering decision making, right? And when we look at decision making, we always look at it from two lenses, right? One, that of the person, what of the person we know, his behaviors, his or her emotions, his or her cognition. And then the context, which is both internal, which could be my immediate goal, immediate mental model around a particular environmental situation, or the external environment in which I'm making a decision, right? So when we're talking about powering decision making, we are looking at all of these factors come together, not just the behavioral transactional data, but the emotional mental model data, plus the immediate cues in the environment to power the recommendation that we throw at people, and then kind of designing the environment in which these decisions are being made, right? So we know that most of the decisions are driven by context. We know that decisions are emotional in nature. We know that most of the decisions we make are not even consciously available to us, right? We kind of make them at a non-conscious level, right? So when you include all of these principles of how decisions are made, what factors go into it, what we get is a personalization version 2, which is now more equipped to not only work with transactional data, but also with emotional data to really create the right recommendations and the right decision environments, right?
Right. So with these kind of motivations, we developed our solution, which is Personalization 2.0. And fundamentally, we took our AI-powered flagship personalization solution, which was customer genomics, and we amped it up. So here's the next version, and we call this personalization powered with, and in the interest of CAP 2021, IES squared, which is intelligence, emotion, at speed and at scale, right? And what we've created is essentially a very holistic one-stop shop for customer decisioning, a highly modular kind of a platform which kind of integrates all of the ideas that you've heard earlier. Um, it combines the power of AI with engineering and design. It uses concepts from behavioral sciences, design strategy to really augment decision making, and get a sense of how we're thinking about it in terms of codifying some of these heuristics. But it really, what it does for you is it really contextualizes personalization, creates a personalized decision environment, right? Earlier we were doing, trying to build a really good recommendation system using AI, and now we're trying to infuse the right decision environment and the right emotions in trying to understand how to make that decision. So, Kautuk, moving on. The way we think about it is essentially along three pillars. And it all starts with data, of course. Sensorization of internal data, really thinking about enterprise data in all its known forms, internal, external sources of both structured and unstructured data, because everywhere your consumers, your customers are, leaving footprints, either through transactions, through interactions, or fundamentally through voice, text, images, right? So all kinds of enterprise data. And what you add on is really the emotional aspects, now trying to understand and quantify their goals, their motivations, and their preferences. So the very first pillar of this solution really is understanding and encoding the customer, encoding the end customer across all of these various different dimensions, and encoding the overall environment. And so the way we think about it is, again, in a highly modular structure. The first one really harmonizes all known and observable information through a harmonization layer, which fundamentally is stitching together all of these data points at the customer and trying to create various different signals which indicate their preferences, their needs, and so on. But what really amps this up is trying to understand and quantify some of these emotions, trying to quantify some of these heuristics into data and feed the models. I think that's always been the missing link. And we have toolkits from behavioral sciences, which do emotional appraisal or do these kind of gamified research to understand behaviors that emerge from biases, from goals, from their preference sets, and so on and so forth. So an output of this first pillar really is that single analytical view of the customer. You've seen this in multiple versions. A lot of people call this the customer 360. Of course, now it's the customer 360 plus plus with a lot of emotional elements kind of quantified into this, right? And so this is where your business information really sits at the most atomic level. Think about customer information across their preferences, their goals, their motivations, their needs, and now, almost emotional quantification of the customers all in one place, right? That's essentially the single analytical record of the customer. The second pillar of this solution really is the predict layer. This is a set of continuously learning and explainable set of AI models, which is now doing really pattern recognition on all those signals you've constructed within the customer 360. These are contextual signals. These are signals which are triangulated or triaged with the environment, with the context. So now you have a much far more powerful understanding or prediction of what's likely to happen next. And fundamentally, what you're trying to do is do a holistic understanding of what's the next action that you need to take with your customers, right? So that's really the output of what the predict layer does. What again amps it up is using design non-conscious design principles to really create and orchestrate and architect those decision environments, right? So this is where the intervention layer comes in. This is where interventions are designed. And fundamentally, the last piece of the puzzle is really orchestrating this out. So really bringing together the output of the optimized AI models along with designs from the intervention layer to create the right intervention, the right nudge on the right channel at the right moment, whether it is a reroute kind of a nudge for Emily, whether it's a cross-sell recommendation for your client, or whether it's to spot whether someone's actually at risk of attrition, right? So all of this kind of comes together in the orchestration layer. This is where the engineering kicks in. This is where the automation kicks in. This is where you start connecting to your execution platform. And what the platform really does, and the power of this kind of comes through because what we orchestrate along with the execution is really understanding the feedback of the consumer action. So when you execute, you're tracking every single action for two reasons. Number one, you're really revalidating your emotional layer and the learning from it with newer and newer data. And of course, you're obviously now also feeding your AI models, updated data so that the next time you actually take a decision, it's optimized understanding what's worked and what's not in the past, right? So what we've kind of mapped out for you is a journey from data to customer decisioning through an always on, continuously learning kind of a customer platform, which not only now uses standard customer signals, but also kind of very seamlessly integrates, ideas of emotion, ideas like emotions, biases, and goals within the overall analytical framework. We're building this for some of you, at scale across, countries. And so, we believe this is, a future-proof way of looking at customer decisioning, very holistic. What it also helps you do is scale very rapidly because, once you have a lot of these building blocks in place, you can add incremental data sources to unpack and uncover value through other incremental use cases as well, right? So all of these structures are highly modular. And what we'll walk you through next is just to give you a real life example of how some of these added components like the emotional layer or the intervention design to non-conscious design principles actually create significant incremental impact through an example that Anurag will walk us through.
Thanks, Rahul. So even at the cost of oversimplifying it, I thought it might be useful to look at how we collect the emotional data, which is fairly soft and unstructured, and how do we then kind of align it with the more structured behavioral or transactional data so that this emotional data can at some point become part of the model, and more importantly become part of the the choice environment design, so to say, right? So this is a use case of credit line increase, a familiar thing that happens to all of us, where our credit card companies send out an increased line to us. There's a piece of work we did several years ago, right? And typically, the belief in the organization was that everybody likes more line. So the more line you give, the happier people are. It's an occasion to be very proud of. It's a reinforcement of your financial discipline and so on and so forth, right? And so every time that line increase came to somebody, it came with a very promotional, happy message asking people to go and take advantage of certain kind of promotions or certain offs and so on and so forth, right? Uh, when we started to kind of work on it, we kind of went out and looked at how emotionally people respond to this intervention of line increases. And one of the things we picked up was that it's not true that there's only one emotion that exists on line increases, right? So while there was a significant segment of people who did feel pride, who had a sense of liking, who felt control, who felt happy about line increases, what we realized was that there was an equally large segment of people, right, who felt a sense of anticipated regret, right, saying this is ways in which credit card companies kind of trap me, right? They're kind of giving me more rope to hang myself. They're anticipating regret out of this situation, losing control over their spends, and so on and so forth, right? Now, these two emotional segments were equally large. Now, we needed to find a data signal, a behavioral signal, which would allow us to plug this segmentation or this emotional data back into the customer databases, right? So picking up from call center scripts, picking up from the ethnolab we did, we are able to identify some of those lead indicators, right? So for instance, transactors primarily kind of showed a control kind of a sense of liking and pride. And people who were revolvers or were carrying very little headroom on their lines typically showed a sense of regret, right? A sense of anticipated regret, right? Now merge that with a lot more, variables like offers line, honest line, utilization, the quantum of line that we carry. We're able to integrate this emotional signals into the databases and then kind of create choice architectures to say, so how do I speak to this customer group versus the other customer group? How do we design the line increase for them? What kind of choices we offer to them? What kind of an emotional, spiel we give them that kind of makes them understand that lines increases could mean different things to different people, right? Now, that was several years ago when we were not kind of working with the kind of analytics capabilities that Fractal now has, right? Or Fractal has, which we at Final Mile did not, right? But now with this capability, we are able to see how we can pick this emotional data at, from various different sources and integrate it with our structured data to improve model outcomes, as well as improve our ability to influence people when a recommendation is pushed to them, right? So just wanted to kind of show you that little example of how emotional data is getting integrated with the more structured data that we have on our consumers.